notes are going to be on simplifying fractions. Simplifying fractions is exactly like creating an equivalent fraction like we took notes on just the other day and we talked about in class. So simplifying fractions is creating an equivalent fraction that is in its smallest form. So we did that a little bit when we were creating equivalent fractions by dividing to their prime. So I'm going to show you another method for simplifying fractions, and I like this one because it's quicker. It's called the GCF, or greatest common factor. Now remember, we've been using factors since day one in school, so we know what the factors are, or how to factor numbers. So the greatest common factor is the largest number that divides the numerator and the denominator, okay? So I've given you an example here. So we have 6 and 9. So 6 here and 9. So what I've done here is I've created the factors of each one of these. We have 1 and 6, so 1 times 6 is 6, and then 2 and 3. 2 times 3 is 6. So those are all the factors of 6 that I can think of. Okay? So 9, we have 1 and 9, and then 3 and 3. So we could list 3 twice, but I just for convenience sake put it just once. So these are the factors of 9. So what is the greatest number, or the biggest number? When we say greatest, we're talking about the biggest number they have in common. Well, it's the 3. Okay, so the 3 is going to be the GCF, or the greatest common factor. Okay, so let's look at 35 and 42. These are kind of big numbers, right? So 35, I factored 35. 1 times 35 is 35. 5 times 7 is 35. And that's about all the factors of 35 you can do. Okay? Let's look at 42. Let's factor 42. It has quite a few more. 1 times 42 is 42. 2 times 21 is 42. 6 times 7 is 42. Okay, so we've factored this guy about as far as we can factor 42. So now we're looking for the greatest number, the biggest number they have in common. So what is that? That would be the 7, okay? They don't have anything in common after the 7, right? So that's their GCF, or the greatest common factor, is 7. So how do we apply this to simplifying fractions? Well, when you find the GCF, it makes simplifying fractions a lot easier. So you find the GCF of both the numerator and the denominator. So we're finding the greatest common factor for the numerator and the denominator. So, and then you divide both the numerator and the denominator by the GCF, okay? The greatest common factor. So, because remember, what we do to the top of a fraction, we have to do to the bottom of the fraction to create that equivalent fraction in its simplest form. So for instance, 10/15. I did a GCF chart down here. So I did all the factors of 10, and I did all the factors of 15. So what is the greatest common factor they have? It's 5. So now we go in and we divide 10 by 5 and 15 by 5, because remember, whatever you do on the top, you do by the do on the bottom. So when we divide that, we end up with 2/3, which 2 is in its prime form and 3 is in its prime form. So now it is in its simplest form. It can't get any smaller. So here's another example, 6/15. So I factored 6, okay, and then there's 4 factors of 6, and then I factored 15. 1, 3, 5, and 15. These are all the numbers that we could put together to possibly make 15. And the greatest common factor they have is 3. Okay, see how they both have a 3 in their factor table? So remember, whatever we do to the top, we do to the bottom. So we're going to divide that numerator by 3 and the denominator by 3, and it's going to create an equivalent fraction in its simplest form of 2/5. So simplifying fractions is pretty easy using the GCF method.